Hello, gardeners. I'm Carol Reese. I'm the horticulture specialist in the Western region for the University of Tennessee Extension Service. Today we're going to talk about gardening under trees, and we're going to discuss ways you can get that beautiful garden. And as soon as I get these slides to advance, like we see here in this slide, a fantastic landscape that I was lucky enough to photograph on one of the Memphis Hydrangea Society tours, which is a great way to get ideas for shade gardens. Join those plant societies that feature shade plants such as hydrangeas and ferns and hostas, and sign up for those tours. So why trees? Why shade? Well, we live in the South. We wouldn't be outside very often if we didn't have a shady place to go. And we also can reduce our energy bills greatly by providing some shade on that house. So let's talk about how to reduce the risk of storm damage. Now, in those days, of course, you had to have shade on the house before air conditioning. Often the trees were planted the year the house was finished, and we can see the enormous size that these trees get over time and the substantial weight that would be if it fell on that house, or that even just that big limb. Look at the size of that limb over this house. So one way we could reduce risk is simply by choosing a species that doesn't have that type of growth habit. So our cypress trees that grow in the swamp, full common name is really common bald cypress, have this whorled, smaller limbs that go around a central trunk. They are not going to have these enormous limbs that can cause a lot of weight, a lot of damage should they fall. These trees, by the way, do not blow over. They have what's known as a buttressed root system. And if you ever see one blown over, or even see a picture of one blown over, please send it to me. I can't find out that one has ever been blown over because of that strong root system that really provides strong support to them. Now, could the top blow out? Yes. Could the limbs blow out? Yes. But as you can see, that is not going to be substantially damaging to your property. Whereas these trees, the oaks and elms, this growth habit we call deliquescent, can certainly form these large limbs, and they do blow over, we know, and all tree roots are really shallow, despite the old myth that we grew up believing that every tree had these really deep tap roots. Just tain't so. So an odd thing that doesn't sound, it sounds counterintuitive actually, that will make your home safer if you want shade, is to plant a lot of trees. And here's why. A single tree, again, we go back to that shallow root system, and let's say it's been raining and the soil is wet, and it gets the whole brunt of a puff of wind, then it's going to pitch over on your house. However, these trees, the trees on the outer perimeter, are not only going to help break up the strong wind before it gets close to your house, but also if you were able to peel back that turf grass, and they're doing a good job with that grass, aren't they? And we'll talk about that in a minute. If you peel back that turf grass, there's actually an enormous network of roots. They are all matted together, so they're helping to anchor each other in a windstorm. So plant a lot of trees. Now, let's talk about if you want to grow grass under trees. So the most shade-tolerant turf grass is fescue, so that would be one option. The other is some of the zoysia cultivars that have been developed to be more shade-tolerant. This is Palisades, and we are trialing the Palisades zoysia at the experiment station where I work. This is our parking lot. And it looks pretty good, doesn't it? However, as you get closer to it, you can see that it's thinning out. It was put down as a dense, thick, cushiony sod like you would expect when you purchase one from a sod farm. And over time, it gets thinner and thinner because it's just not getting enough sunlight. Turf grass really needs several hours of sunlight to prosper. So there is no shade-loving turf grass. There's only turf grasses that are somewhat more shade tolerant. Now, what you can do to help, if you're just bound and determined to have turf grass under trees, which wouldn't be my choice, is get those trees limbed up, we call it. Limb them up so that only 2/3 of the tree has a leafy canopy. Now, don't do that too soon. In other words, if you try to take off too many bottom limbs on a small tree, you're actually depriving it of photosynthate because, of course, the leaves are providing the nutrition for the tree's growth. So just keep removing that lower third, and eventually you'll get that light that comes in the morning and in the evening when it gets low, and you'll get some good sunlight under that tree. Or a better option would be simply put your trees in mulched beds. Don't try to grow grass right under them. It's easy mowing here. We got the best of both worlds. We got lawn and we've got trees. So I think this is a fabulous option, and I do love my lawn. I have dogs, and that's kind of my thoroughfare. This is not my house. This is Unique Gardens up in Raleigh, or near Raleigh, North Carolina. But it's a great option. Or do what J. Paul Moore does in Nashville, Tennessee, professional photographer, if you can't tell by this photo, kind enough to lend me this picture of his moss lawn. So this moss lawn likes all the conditions that grass does not, which is compact, shady, moist, acid, and it's an absolute thing of beauty. Twice a year, he and a friend get down on their knees and they weed it. So it's not no maintenance, but beats mowing maybe a lot. My option, my personal preference would be simply to have paths and shade-loving plants that are not too aggressive. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. And it's just a better place to garden because it's easier gardening in the shade. There's still going to be some weeding, but the weed pressure isn't as bad in the shade, and it's certainly not as hot and sweaty. So let's talk about then what we want to do about getting a little bit of sunlight in there, because even our shade-loving plants love a few hours of sunlight. They're going to bloom better, they're going to grow better, they're going to respond better. So we're still going to limb up these trees and get a little bit of dappled light in there. And get some, I guess please don't. Get some dappled light in there, get the trees limbed up to get some sunlight in there. Your hydrangeas will bloom better, your plants will grow faster. The exception is with our southern magnolia. We do not want to limb those up. Let them go all the way down to the ground. So use them out there for like screen plantings and let that, because it's always that leaf litter underneath. They're very dry, very hard to grow things on. If somebody's already limbed yours up, then do a little skirt of shrubbery around it so that you don't have to, Angus, please, don't have to worry about looking at all that litter underneath. So do something though around the bottom of your tree, because you don't want to let that lawnmower or weed eater get next to your trunk. That's how we ding and damage and often kill some of our little trees. So these kinds of things are an option. Y'all forgive me. Come on, Angus. Sorry about that. He got shut out of the room. He can't stand it. So this is at least going to keep you from compacting the soil under that tree too, and keep you from getting that lawnmower next to it. Needs a little weeding, doesn't it? Ideally, you're going to mulch all the way out to that drip line. So if you can do, and put your trees in big beds if you can, that's a great option, and it's really better for the tree. I would avoid aggressive ground covers. This is what happens when you use English ivy. It can get into the woodland, becomes a terrible invasive issue, and it actually endangers your tree. This is going to eventually shade out the tree. That's going to prevent the tree from having enough photosynthate to keep it heavy. To keep it happy. And it's also going to make it top heavy. Here's another tree that is going to be subject to wind throw because that ivy catches the wind and now it's top heavy and it's going to blow over when that soil gets wet. So don't avoid these aggressive ground covers. Now you say, well, Vinca doesn't climb like that. It's a good aggressive ground cover. I can plant that, not worry about getting up next to that tree, and there won't be any maintenance. Oh, yes, there will. There will be maintenance. Because this is a tree at the experiment station where I work in Jackson, Tennessee. And I get up close to it, you'll start seeing there's weeds all in that ground cover. There's our greenbrier. There's our native black cherry. There's privet. There is poison ivy. There's wild grape. What do those all have in common? Birds. Birds like to eat them. Birds like to eat them and poop down into that ground cover. And how are you going to kill those? There's no herbicides that's going to kill those without killing your ground cover. So you're going to stand in that ankle-deep ground cover. A lot of you who are snake wary won't like that, to hand weed. So not a great option. Plus, if you're trying to grow anything else under that tree, if you want to have some ferns or hydrangeas, they're going to overwhelm them. So not really a great option. Some of these invasive ground covers, like mondo grass or Larapi spicata, we're going to talk about the two different types of monkey grass here in a minute. They run too. So it's always kind of a good idea, if you want to use some of those, to use them where they are contained and can't run away from you out into the woods or out into the lawn where you did not want them. So this is Liriopes spicata. There's two plants that run around named monkey grass, and they're different species. Liriopes spicata is a running monkey grass. And this is Liriopes muscari, which is a clumping monkey grass. Now the clumps will get bigger over time, but they do not run. They don't go places where you did not want them. And there's a lot of cool types of this type of monkey grass. Liriopes spicata can have variegated forms and white flowered forms. And they can really be quite beautiful. Our plants that spread slowly. This is a dwarf golden sweet flag. We plug these in pretty densely because we want them to cover. And so these slow spreading ones, it's going to take a while for them to get a solid cover. And you see how cute they are. They're like little green calyx. There they are by my size 10 foot. And this is what they look like winter and summer, by the way. They do need shade. Here's what it looks like when it's filled in. I took this picture just a couple of weeks ago from about 2 or 3 years from planting. Probably 3 or 4, actually. Anyway, this particular plant, the golden sweet flag, does need shade if it's a dry site. It will take some sun if it's in a moist site, but it loves dry shade, and that's what it's going to look like year round. So see the dwarf there, and then the one to the right of it is the regular size sweet flag. And then we also have a golden form of the regular size sweet flag called Ogon. So those are some slow spreading options, and also the fact that they will take wet sites may be a benefit for you. But honestly, I might just use a few little spots of ground cover for the texture or the color, or for a theme to pull me through the garden. But mainly I just want to plant shade-loving plants. It's another place, it's another excuse for me to buy more plants. So ferns and hydrangeas and some of the viburnums and hostas and all those cool plants that are going to be great in that shade garden. If you just want to stick with annuals, you know, this is a very simple but beautiful statement here with the white begonias and the white caladiums. Now the trick to getting these things growing under there, because it's tough, there's a dense root environment in there, and there's a lot of competition for water and nutrition. So here are the things you're going to have to do. You're going to have to provide some organic matter to give those plants good purchase. And you're going to have to provide extra water and nutrition for the first few years at least. So this is a good option, is a little overhead system like this where you can put in new emitters. I don't like an irrigation system that waters everything indiscriminately, because I might be overwatering my hydrangeas, which do not like wet heat, but my ferns might prefer more water. So I like to keep an irrigation system, or just hand water, or put sprinklers on them when they need to. So be careful about overwatering when you're establishing those plants. And that organic matter needs to be loose and fluffy. You know, those tree roots need air exchange. You come in and pile a bunch of topsoil on top of your tree roots, you're going to kill your tree. So get a fluffy, light organic matter that's going to still allow good air exchange. And we're going to try to imitate what happens naturally in the woods, really. In the woods, the trees are self-mulching. They're dropping leaves. It's breaking down into a leafy duff. The organic matter's releasing nutrition back to the trees, keeping the soil relatively cool and moist. So we're going to do that under our trees because we've been blowing all those leaves away, and we have not been allowing that to happen. And these decomposing leaves, you could leave just the leaves yourself, and I'm going to show you a couple of places that have done that. And you could also just forego raking by planting very densely under that tree so that the leaves sift down and aren't noticeable among your shrubs and perennials. So here's Garden Zoe in Collierville. And you see what they're doing. They are blowing their leaves off their paths, which are moss, by the way, and they're putting a new bed in. So what they're going to do is blow these leaves in here, let them decompose for a couple of years, and then they're going to have a nice, rich, organic bed to give that extra nutrition, get those plants established, get those shades and perennials in there. So you could do that as well. And you could bring in soil. If you're in a hurry, you don't want to wait a couple of years for leaves to break down, then do a raised bed, bring some soil in, or just bring some soil in on top of your tree roots. You just got to remember not to do too much. Notice about how much area is covered around this tree in this photo, and we're going to talk about this rule of thirds that trees often go by. So look at that drip line and think about that circle under the tree that is defined by that drip line. And you can cover up to a third of that root zone without bothering that tree at all, even with heavier soil. Now we're going to worry about pi. We're not going to do any math here, I promise you. But just remember, you can cover up at least a third with no problem. And there's different ways of doing it. Here you see a raised bed that's just taking in part of the tree, a place to get those plants established. As long as there's plenty of tree roots that are coming back to the original level, get close to that soil surface, then it's fine. It's going to get plenty of oxygen to those roots. All right, let's talk about just a few great plants for shade. Of course, you're going to want some hydrangeas. And in this photo, we've got both our native smooth hydrangea and our oak leaf hydrangeas there in the background. And in the foreground, our big leaf hydrangeas. Now remember, they do like a few hours of sun to bloom better. So get those trees limbed up and let a little sunlight in there. A great plant, another native actually, is a bottlebrush buckeye. Bottlebrush buckeye is a summer bloomer, and this is why it's called bottlebrush. It's fragrant, the pollinators love it. This is a big shrub with that gorgeous tropical foliage texture. It's going to have a lemony yellow fall color, so a lot of great assets for that shrub. A lot of great viburnums that work well in shade. Viburnums are quite shade tolerant, but a particular favorite of mine is canola. It's evergreen, got spring bloom, it's fragrant. The fruits that come on after the blooms are attractive and also edible for our birds. Boxwoods, I've fallen in love with this variegated boxwood. This is at the experiment station. You can see our parking lot gazebo. You may recognize if you've been to our display gardens. There in the background, it stays naturally compact. I love variegated and golden plants in the shade because they really brighten up those shady areas. So there we go. There's another one of those great monkey grasses I was telling you about. Liriopes muscari, a clump forming form called PD ingot. And you see how bright and wonderful that is and how beautifully contrasted with some other plants. This sedge is a great golden option, Everillo sedge. And here it is planted under a good shrub per shade, a good broadleaf evergreen, the distiliums. And they come in different forms, wide spreading as you see here, or upright forms. But Everillo also looks great in a pot, one of my favorites, where just put it in a tall blue container and let it cascade. If you told me I could only have one fern, it's going to be autumn fern because it's so easy, it doesn't demand a lot of water, and it's evergreen in mild winters. Now there's a great kind of form that has golden new foliage, and it's called Autumn Brilliance. And this is Autumn Brilliance. It makes a nice bushel-sized fern. It's not running, it just stays put. The variegated Solomon seal is not evergreen, dies to the ground, comes back up in spring, blooms. I just love it. It's a slow spreader. It makes a colony over time. If it gets where you don't want it, you can dig some up and sell at the plant sale or share with your friends. But look at the texture it adds in this gorgeous combination at one of the Memphis Hydrangea Society meetings. I didn't think I was going to be a hosta person. I kind of made fun of people who collected dozens and dozens of hosta. And then I saw curly fries, had to have it. And now I guess I've got probably 15 or 20 hostas out there. So I got it. I got the bug. Want more flowers out there? Because most of the time we rely on foliage and foliage textures in the shade. Well, we got that too. I'm crazy about the deciduous azaleas because they're just a little bit less common. All the other common azaleas, the evergreen forms, there's plenty of them around for me to enjoy in other people's yards. So I'm going to probably get some of these deciduous native types. Japanese anemone, a late summer bloomer, looks delicate. It's not. Slow spreading colony, pegs out you can share with your friends. Got to get you some spigelia. It's a late spring bloomer. The hummingbirds love it. It's a woodland native, but it actually will bloom in some sun too, and actually more densely. So get a little bit of light in there for a good show of display. And sometimes it'll give you a second bloom in the fall. It used to be hard to find in the trade, but now it's showing up at most of the better garden centers. Roof iris. We think of iris as sun lovers, but roof iris does just about as well in shade. And you see the beautiful bloom on it here in spring. But honestly, I grow it for the foliage. It's one of the iris that makes a gorgeous, gorgeous whirl of graceful foliage. So that's my main thing about it. I adore it. Toad lilies, again, a late summer bloomer. The variegated forms allow you this interest before the bloom. And even though the blooms themselves aren't this really dynamic show that you'll notice from a distance. When you get up so close, they are so delicate and wonderful. They're like little orchids. I often see bees enjoying them as well. Yes, there are hardy begonias. This is Begonia grandis. Not only is it root hardy, but it will reseed a little bit for you, not horribly. And the bloom display on it is quite nice. And another late summer bloomer. Hellebores are going to bloom for you in the winter. Very much appreciated. An evergreen perennial that thrives in dry shade. Not a good new forms out there that help hold the flowers up and are more showy. So these are going to bloom late winter on into spring, and used to be hard to find hellebores. Now they're in every garden center, and deservedly so. All right, so get out there, create that beautiful shade garden. Hope that gave you some tips. If you want some more plants, because of course I didn't have time to do a lot, I've got a lot of lists I could offer you, and we have some new publications that are coming up very soon on our uthort.com website. So these are this get in touch information. Luckily, you're watching this on a recording, so you can run back through it, get the names of plants, and get the contact information, and email if you like. I'll be glad to send you my list. Thanks very much. Appreciate your time.